My name is Sophia Jolie and I am 32 years old. Nothing could have prepared me for what I witnessed on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My 89-year-old grandmother, who had survived the Holocaust and raised me after my parents died, lay collapsed on the marble floor of my own wedding venue while my future mother-in-law stood over her, complaining about how the drama was ruining her carefully orchestrated social event. My grandmother's medication, which I had specifically placed in the bridal suite refrigerator, had been moved to make room for champagne bottles that cost more than most people's monthly rent. What happened next would expose the true nature of the family I was marrying into and change the course of my entire life. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from and please like and subscribe to hear how I made sure they would never harm my family again. Growing up, my grandmother Elena was everything to me. After losing my parents in a car accident when I was 7, she became my world. Despite living on a modest pension, she made sure I never felt the absence of anything important. She worked part-time at a local bakery well into her 70s, her arthritic hands still skillfully braiding challah bread every Friday, just so she could afford to buy me books and art supplies. Every evening, she would sit beside my bed and tell me stories of resilience, of how she had survived the unthinkable and rebuilt her life with nothing but determination and love. "Sophia," she would say in her gentle accent, "strength is not about fighting everything. It is about knowing what is worth fighting for." Those words would prove prophetic in ways neither of us could have imagined. Elena raised me to value education above all else. Despite having only a 4th-grade education herself due to the war, she understood that knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take away. She saved every penny from her bakery job to help pay for my college tuition, working despite doctor's orders to rest her failing heart. When I graduated summa cum laude with my degree in international business, she cried with pride, clutching my diploma as if it were made of gold. My career in luxury hotel management flourished beyond both our dreams. Starting as a front desk associate at the prestigious Grandview Resort, I worked my way up through sheer determination and Elena's unwavering support. She would pack my lunch every morning for 5 years, even after I could afford to eat at expensive restaurants, because homemade food carries love, she insisted. When I was promoted to Regional Director of Operations at age 29, overseeing 5 luxury properties across the state, Elena insisted on framing my promotion letter next to my college diploma. Elena's health had been declining gradually over the past 3 years. Her heart condition, a result of the trauma and stress she endured during the war, required constant monitoring and a strict medication schedule. She had survived breast cancer twice, each time with the same quiet determination that had carried her through everything else. Despite using a walker now and needing help with many daily tasks, she maintained her independence in her small apartment, which I had equipped with every safety feature imaginable. Our daily routine was sacred to both of us. Every morning at 7 a.m., I would call to make sure she had taken her morning medications. Every Sunday, we would spend the entire day together, cooking traditional recipes she taught me, watching old movies, and planning my future. She was my anchor, my compass, and my greatest source of strength. I met Alexander Blackwood at an industry gala celebrating sustainable tourism initiatives. He was the heir apparent to Blackwood Hospitality, a multinational hotel empire worth over $2 billion. Tall, impeccably dressed, and charming in that effortless way that comes from generational wealth, he approached me during the cocktail hour after hearing my presentation on innovative guest experience strategies. "Your ideas about personalized luxury experiences are exactly what our industry needs," he said, his smile warm and apparently genuine. "I'd love to hear more about your approach over dinner sometime." Our courtship felt like a fairy tale at first. Alexander was attentive, romantic, and seemed genuinely interested in my background and my relationship with Elena. He would ask thoughtful questions about her stories, bring her flowers when he visited, and even learned a few words in her native language to make her smile. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, he included Elena in the moment, asking for her blessing before getting down on one knee in her tiny living room. "She is good for you," Elena told me that night after Alexander left. "But watch his family, darling. Great wealth sometimes comes with small hearts." The engagement period should have been filled with joy, but instead became a masterclass in manipulation and control. From the moment we announced our engagement, Alexander's mother, Victoria Blackwood, inserted herself into every aspect of our wedding planning with the subtlety of a bulldozer and the entitlement of a monarch. Victoria was the epitome of old money elegance, with silver hair always perfectly coiffed, designer clothing that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and a smile that never quite reached her calculating blue eyes. She had married into the Blackwood fortune 35 years ago and had spent every year since perfecting the art of social manipulation disguised as helpfulness. "Darling," she said during our first wedding planning meeting, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I simply must insist on helping with the arrangements. The Blackwood name carries certain expectations in our social circles. We cannot have anything that might appear provincial." She said provincial, while looking directly at Elena, who sat quietly in her simple but clean dress, hands folded in her lap. Alexander's father, Charles Blackwood III, was cut from the same cloth but with less pretense. A man who believed his wealth gave him the right to control everyone around him. He spoke in commands rather than requests and expected immediate compliance. During our second meeting, he announced that the wedding would be held at the Blackwood family estate rather than the intimate garden venue Elena and I had selected. "The estate has hosted Blackwood weddings for 4 generations, he declared, as if that settled the matter. "It would be inappropriate to break tradition for personal preferences." Every suggestion I made was politely dismissed and replaced with something more suitable. The intimate guest list of 50 people Elena and I had planned grew to 300, filled with people I had never met. The simple ceremony Elena and I had envisioned was replaced with an elaborate production complete with a full orchestra, professional photographers, and enough flowers to stock a small florist shop. "You must understand," Victoria explained when I expressed concerns about the escalating costs. "This wedding isn't just about you two. It's about the Blackwood legacy, our business relationships, and our position in society. Surely you want to represent the family appropriately." The manipulation was masterful. Every objection I raised was reframed as either selfishness or failure to understand the importance of family reputation. When I mentioned that Elena might be overwhelmed by such a large celebration, Victoria's response chilled me to the bone. "Perhaps it would be better if your grandmother attended just the ceremony and skipped the reception," she suggested sweetly. "We wouldn't want her to feel out of place among our guests." Alexander, to his credit, initially tried to support my preferences, but his resistance crumbled under his parents' relentless pressure. "Let's just give them this," he would say after each planning session. "It's one day and it makes them happy. We can have the marriage we want afterward." But I was beginning to understand that afterward might never come. The warning signs escalated as the wedding approached. Victoria insisted on personally approving every vendor, replacing several of my choices with more expensive alternatives. She changed the menu without consulting me, removing dishes Elena could safely eat with her dietary restrictions and replacing them with elaborate courses featuring ingredients she was allergic to. "Your grandmother can simply eat beforehand," Victoria suggested when I pointed this out. "The menu is designed to impress our guests, not accommodate every individual restriction." 2 weeks before the wedding, I discovered that Victoria had contacted Elena's doctor directly, claiming to be coordinating care for the wedding day. She had requested a detailed list of Elena's medications and medical conditions, ostensibly to ensure proper emergency protocols. Elena, trusting and wanting to be helpful, had authorized the information release. "She seemed so concerned about my well-being," Elena told me, confusion evident in her voice. "She said she wanted to make sure I was comfortable and safe during the celebration." Something about this made my stomach turn, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Victoria's attention to Elena's medical needs should have been reassuring, but instead it felt invasive and controlling. The final straw came during the rehearsal dinner, held at an exclusive restaurant that specialized in molecular gastronomy. The avant-garde menu featured dishes that looked more like science experiments than food, presented on plates that cost more than Elena's monthly groceries. Elena, trying to be gracious, attempted to eat the unfamiliar cuisine but struggled with both the unusual textures and her trembling hands. Victoria watched with barely concealed disdain as Elena accidentally dropped her fork, the sound echoing in the suddenly quiet dining room. "Perhaps finger foods would be more appropriate for some of our guests," she murmured to the person beside her, loud enough for Elena to hear. Elena's face flushed with embarrassment, and she spent the rest of the evening silent and withdrawn. As I helped her to the car afterward, she squeezed my hand tightly. "Promise me something, Sophia," she whispered, her voice unusually serious. "If something happens to me tomorrow, don't let them change you. Stay strong, stay true to who you are." I laughed it off as pre-wedding nerves, but her words haunted me as I lay awake that night. The wedding day dawned crisp and clear, with that perfect autumn light that photographers dream of. I woke early in the bridal suite at the Blackwood estate, surrounded by my bridesmaids and feeling a mixture of excitement and unease that I attributed to normal wedding day jitters. Elena had been settled in the guest wing the night before, and I had personally placed her heart medications in the small refrigerator in my bridal suite, along with explicit instructions to staff about her medication schedule. She took her pills at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 8 p.m. without fail, and missing a dose could trigger dangerous irregular heartbeats. "Don't worry about anything today," I had told her the night before. "Just rest, take your medications on time, and let us take care of everything else." At 9 a.m. my phone rang. It was Elena's doctor. "I'm calling to confirm the medication change for your grandmother," he said, sounding confused. "Mrs. Blackwood contacted me yesterday requesting that we adjust Elena's dosage for the wedding day to prevent any incidents. But I wanted to verify this with you directly." My blood ran cold. "What medication change? I never authorized any changes." "Mrs. Blackwood said you were concerned about your grandmother becoming emotional or overwhelmed during the ceremony and wanted her anxiety medication increased and her heart medication reduced to prevent any episodes that might disrupt the event." I gripped the phone tighter, my hands beginning to shake. "Doctor, do not make any changes to my grandmother's medication. None whatsoever. And please document this conversation." "Of course," he replied, clearly relieved. I thought it was unusual. Changing her heart medication could be very dangerous. After hanging up, I immediately tried calling Alexander, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling Victoria, but her assistant said she was indisposed with wedding preparations. My bridesmaids, noticing my distress, gathered around me as I explained what had happened. "That's not right," said my maid of honor, Jessica, who worked as a nurse. "You don't just change someone's heart medication to make them more manageable. That's borderline elder abuse." I decided to check on Elena myself, but when I tried to leave the bridal suite, I found a member of the estate security team stationed outside my door. "I'm sorry, Miss Jolie," he said politely but firmly. "Mrs. Blackwood has instructed that the bride not leave this wing until the ceremony begins. Something about maintaining tradition and ensuring no bad luck." "I need to check on my grandmother," I insisted. "Mrs. Blackwood assured me that your grandmother is being well cared for by the estate medical staff. She's resting comfortably and shouldn't be disturbed." Estate medical staff? Elena didn't need medical supervision beyond her regular medications, which I had specifically arranged to handle myself. Growing increasingly frantic, I called the main house repeatedly, but no one would put me through to Elena's room. Every call was intercepted by staff who assured me that Mrs. Rosenberg is resting comfortably and preparing for the ceremony. At 1 p.m., as my hair and makeup were being finished, Jessica returned from a reconnaissance mission looking grim. "I couldn't get to your grandmother's room," she reported quietly. "There's a nurse stationed outside her door who says she's under medical observation and can't have visitors. When I asked about her 2 p.m. medication, the nurse said it had been handled by the physician." My panic reached a crescendo. Something was very wrong, but I felt trapped by the circumstances of my own wedding day. Guests were arriving, photographers were waiting, and everyone around me kept insisting that everything was under control. At 3 p.m., I was walked down the aisle by my grandmother's empty chair prominently displayed in the front row, a single white rose placed on the seat in honor of Mrs. Rosenberg, who is resting before the reception, as the ceremony program explained. I barely remember taking my vows, my eyes constantly searching the crowd for Elena's familiar face. Alexander seemed nervous but attributed it to normal wedding jitters when I whispered questions about my grandmother during the brief moments between ceremony elements. "Mother assured me she's fine," he whispered back. "She's saving her energy for the reception." The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, a space that could comfortably accommodate 500 guests but felt intimate with its crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. The celebration was everything Victoria had envisioned, elegant, impressive, and completely devoid of the warmth and personality Elena and I had originally planned. At 6 p.m., I finally broke away from the receiving line and demanded to see my grandmother. "Of course, darling," Victoria said smoothly. "She's been asking for you. She's in the blue room just off the main hallway." I found Elena sitting in an uncomfortable straight-back chair, looking pale and disoriented. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before, something formal and expensive that hung awkwardly on her small frame. "Sophia," she said, her voice sounding strange and distant. "When did you get here? Are we at the wedding?" My heart sank. This wasn't how Elena normally spoke or acted. She seemed confused, almost drugged. "Grandma, how are you feeling? Did you take your 2 p.m. medication?" "The nice nurse gave me my pills," she said vaguely. "Different pills. She said they were better for today." I knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in mine. They were cold and trembling more than usual. "What did the pills look like?" Elena frowned, struggling to focus. "White and blue, I think. The nurse said they would help me stay calm for your big day." White and blue. Elena's heart medication was small and yellow. Her anxiety medication, which she rarely took, was pink. These were different pills entirely. "Grandma, I need to get your real medication. Stay right here, okay?" But when I returned to the bridal suite to retrieve Elena's medication from the refrigerator, I found it empty except for expensive champagne and caviar. My carefully labeled pill organizer was nowhere to be found. Racing back to the blue room, I found it empty. Elena was gone. I searched frantically, finally finding her in the main ballroom, seated at a table far from the head table, looking lost and overwhelmed among strangers. Victoria approached me as I hurried toward my grandmother. "There you are, darling," she said, her smile razor-sharp. "Your grandmother was feeling a bit confused, so we thought it best to have her supervised. The estate physician has everything under control." "Where are her real medications?" I demanded. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," Victoria replied innocently. "The physician has been managing her care today to ensure she doesn't have any episodes that might disrupt the celebration." At that moment, Elena attempted to stand, probably to use the restroom, but her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed to the marble floor with a sickening thud, her head striking the ground hard enough to echo through the ballroom. The music stopped. Guests gasped and stepped back. And Victoria's first words were not of concern for Elena, but of irritation about the disruption. "How inconvenient," she muttered, loud enough for several people to hear. "Someone call the estate physician. We need to handle this quickly before it ruins the entire evening." I dropped to my knees beside Elena, whose eyes were closed and whose breathing was shallow and irregular. "Call 911. I shouted to the stunned crowd. "She needs a hospital, not an estate physician." "That's really not necessary," Victoria said, her voice carrying that tone of authority she used when she expected compliance. "Our physician is perfectly capable of handling elderly confusion. There's no need to create a scene." Elena's lips were turning blue, and I could feel her pulse racing erratically under my fingers. This wasn't confusion. This was a medical emergency, possibly triggered by whatever medication they had given her instead of her prescribed heart pills. "She needs her real medication now," I screamed, no longer caring about wedding etiquette or social expectations. "Someone has replaced her heart medication with something else." The crowd murmured with shock, but Victoria maintained her composure. You're clearly upset, dear. Weddings can be very stressful for brides. Perhaps you should let the medical professionals handle this situation. Alexander appeared at my side, his face pale. What happened? Your mother had someone change Elena's medication without authorization, I said, still cradling my unconscious grandmother. Elena is having some kind of cardiac event because she hasn't had her real heart medication all day. That can't be right, Alexander said, but his voice lacked conviction. Mother would never, there must be some mistake. The paramedics arrived despite Victoria's protests, pushing through the crowd of wedding guests in their formal attire. As they worked on Elena, checking her vital signs and asking rapid-fire questions, I overheard one of them speaking into his radio. Female, 89 years old, presenting with cardiac arrhythmia and possible drug interaction. Patient appears to have been given medication inconsistent with her medical history. Requesting immediate transport. Drug interaction. The words hit me like a physical blow. As Elena was loaded onto a stretcher, barely conscious but finally receiving proper medical care, Victoria approached me one final time. I hope you realize, she said, her voice low and venomous, that this outburst has thoroughly embarrassed the Blackwood family in front of some very important people. There will be consequences for this drama. Drama? She called my grandmother's medical emergency drama. In the ambulance, holding Elena's cold hand as the paramedics worked to stabilize her heart rhythm, I made a decision that would change everything. This family had deliberately endangered my grandmother's life to maintain control over their social event. They had treated her like an inconvenience to be managed rather than a human being deserving of basic medical care and respect. They had shown me exactly who they were, and I believed them. The hospital emergency room was a stark contrast to the opulent ballroom I had left behind. Under harsh fluorescent lights, still wearing my wedding dress, I provided Elena's medical history to the attending physician while she underwent emergency treatment. The medication she was given today could have killed her, Dr. Morrison told me bluntly after reviewing Elena's chart and the blood work results. Whoever made this substitution either had no medical knowledge whatsoever or deliberately intended to cause harm. We're talking about giving anxiety medication to someone with severe heart disease while withholding their prescribed cardiac medication. This goes beyond negligence into potential criminal territory. Elena remained unconscious for 3 hours while doctors worked to counteract the effects of the inappropriate medication and restore her normal heart rhythm. During those hours, I sat beside her bed, my wedding dress wrinkled and stained, processing the full magnitude of what had happened. Alexander arrived around midnight, looking haggard and carrying my purse and shoes. "How is she?" he asked quietly. "Alive," I replied without looking at him. "No thanks to your family." "Sophia, I had no idea about the medication. I swear to you if I had known." "But you didn't ask, did you?" I turned to face him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "When I tried to check on her this morning, when I couldn't reach her, when I was obviously worried, you just kept telling me your mother had everything under control." Alexander sat heavily in the chair beside me. "I thought she did. I thought Mother was just being thorough. Your mother convinced Elena's doctor to change her medication to make her more manageable for your wedding. When that didn't work, she had someone give Elena completely different pills without any medical supervision. Elena could have died, Alexander. On our wedding day, in front of 300 people, because your mother thought her comfort was more important than my grandmother's life." "I'll talk to them," he said weakly. "I'll make sure they understand." "Understand what? That elderly people deserve basic medical care? That you don't drug someone without their consent? That human life is more valuable than social appearances." My voice was rising, and a nurse appeared to ask us to keep it down. "What do you want me to do?" Alexander asked, and the helplessness in his voice told me everything I needed to know about our future. Elena regained consciousness the next morning, weak but alert. Her first words were an apology for ruining my wedding day. "You didn't ruin anything, Grandma," I said, squeezing her hand. "They did. And I'm going to make sure they face consequences for what they did to you." Over the next week, as Elena recovered in the hospital under careful medical supervision, I consulted with attorneys, gathered evidence, and made decisions that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. The first attorney I spoke with specialized in elder abuse cases. "What you're describing constitutes several serious crimes," she told me after reviewing the hospital records and witness statements I had collected. "Elder abuse, reckless endangerment, possibly attempted poisoning depending on intent. The medical evidence is very clear that your grandmother was given inappropriate medication that directly caused her cardiac emergency." I had documented everything: the phone call from Elena's doctor, the missing medication from my bridal suite, the statements from wedding guests who witnessed Victoria's callous response to Elena's collapse, and most importantly, the hospital's blood work proving that Elena had been given medication she was not prescribed. The second attorney I consulted specialized in family law and asset protection. "Given the circumstances," he advised, "you need to protect yourself and your grandmother financially before taking any legal action. If your husband's family has the resources and influence you describe, they'll likely try to tie up any assets they can reach." I learned that the Blackwood family had more than just social influence. They sat on hospital boards, had connections throughout the local legal system, and had enough money to make problems disappear. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had messed with the wrong person's family in front of witnesses who couldn't be bought or intimidated. Jessica, my maid of honor and the nurse who had first recognized the seriousness of the medication issue, provided a detailed statement about Victoria's suspicious behavior and the security restrictions that had prevented me from checking on Elena. Several other wedding guests, horrified by what they had witnessed, came forward with their own accounts of the evening. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source: the estate's own security cameras. In trying to document their elegant wedding for posterity, the Blackwoods had inadvertently recorded Victoria personally removing Elena's medication from my bridal suite and instructing estate staff to prevent me from accessing my grandmother. When I presented this evidence to Alexander, still hoping he might take a stand against his family, his response shattered any remaining illusions about our marriage. "These recordings could destroy my family's reputation," he said, his concern clearly focused on protecting the Blackwoods rather than seeking justice for Elena. "Surely we can handle this privately without involving lawyers or police." "Your family nearly killed my grandmother," I replied, my voice steady despite the pain of his betrayal. "This goes far beyond reputation management." "But think about what this means for our future," he pleaded. "If you pursue this legally, it will tear our families apart permanently. Is that really what you want?" That question revealed everything I needed to know about Alexander's priorities and character. He was asking me to choose between justice for my grandmother and maintaining his family's social standing. The choice was clear. I filed for divorce the following Monday. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. The medical evidence was overwhelming, and several prominent wedding guests, including a federal judge and 2 state senators who had witnessed Victoria's behavior, provided statements that made it impossible for the Blackwood family to deny or minimize what had happened. Victoria was charged with elder abuse and reckless endangerment. Charles faced charges related to conspiracy and intimidation. The estate physician who had participated in the medication substitution lost his medical license and faced criminal charges of his own. The civil suit resulted in a settlement that ensured Elena would have the best possible medical care for the rest of her life, along with enough financial security to make her comfortable. More importantly, the public nature of the case made it impossible for the Blackwoods to harm anyone else's family in the same way. Alexander chose to stand by his parents throughout the legal proceedings, hiring expensive attorneys and trying to minimize their culpability. He never once asked about Elena's recovery or expressed genuine remorse for what his family had done. His true character, revealed under pressure, made me grateful that I had discovered it before our marriage became permanent. 6 months after what should have been the happiest day of my life, I sat in Elena's hospital room, now converted to a comfortable long-term care suite, reading her favorite poetry while she recovered her strength. The trauma of that day had accelerated her decline, but her spirit remained unbroken. "I'm proud of you," she told me one afternoon, her voice still weak but determined. You fought for what was right, even when it was difficult. That's what real strength looks like. The experience changed me in fundamental ways. I learned that protecting the people you love sometimes requires making choices that others will criticize or fail to understand. I discovered that standing up to wealth and power is possible when you have truth and determination on your side. Most importantly, I realized that family is defined by love and respect, not by legal documents or social status. The people who truly belong in your life are those who value your well-being and honor your boundaries, regardless of their relationship to you by blood or marriage. Elena lived for 2 more years, surrounded by love and receiving the care she deserved. She passed peacefully in her sleep, holding my hand, after telling me one final time how proud she was of the strength I had shown. The Blackwood family lost much more than money in the aftermath of their cruelty. Their social standing crumbled when the truth about their treatment of an elderly Holocaust survivor became public knowledge. Board positions were quietly rescinded, charity events stopped including them on guest lists, and their business relationships suffered as partners distanced themselves from the scandal. Alexander eventually moved abroad, unable to rebuild his reputation in a community that knew what his family had done. We never spoke again after the divorce was finalized, and I felt only relief at his absence from my life. The aftermath of the legal proceedings brought unexpected revelations about the Blackwood family's history of manipulation and control. During the discovery process, my attorney uncovered a pattern of similar behavior spanning decades. Alexander's sister wasn't the only family member who had experienced their parents' toxic interference. Court documents revealed testimonies from former business partners, household staff, and even family friends who had suffered under Victoria and Charles's need to control everyone in their orbit. A particularly disturbing deposition came from Elena's physician, Dr. Martinez, who revealed the full extent of Victoria's attempts to manipulate Elena's medical care. Beyond the wedding day medication incident, Victoria had made multiple unauthorized calls to Elena's doctor, her pharmacist, and even her insurance company, attempting to gather information and influence treatment decisions. Mrs. Blackwood called my office at least 6 times over the 2 months prior to the wedding, Dr. Martinez testified. She claimed to be coordinating care for Mrs. Rosenberg, but her questions were inappropriate and invasive. She wanted detailed information about life expectancy, cognitive decline predictions, and whether Mrs. Rosenberg had any family history of mental illness. When I refused to provide this information without proper authorization, she became quite aggressive. The insurance company records showed that Victoria had attempted to change Elena's beneficiary information, claiming to have power of attorney that she did not possess. The pharmacist testified that Victoria had tried to convince him to deliver Elena's medications to the Blackwood estate instead of Elena's apartment, ostensibly for better supervision, but actually to gain control over Elena's medical care. These revelations painted a chilling picture of systematic elder abuse that went far beyond wedding day manipulation. Victoria had been planning to isolate Elena from her support systems and gradually assume control over her life, all under the guise of providing better care than Elena could manage independently. The Blackwood family's attempts to discredit Elena during the legal proceedings backfired spectacularly when character witnesses came forward to testify about Elena's remarkable life story and sharp mental acuity. Holocaust survivors' organizations, the community center where Elena volunteered, and even the bakery where she had worked for decades provided statements about Elena's dignity, intelligence, and community contributions. Rabbi Sarah Goldstein, who had known Elena for 20 years, provided particularly powerful testimony. Elena Rosenberg survived the Holocaust through intelligence, courage, and an unbreakable spirit. To suggest that this woman, who rebuilt her life from nothing and raised a successful granddaughter while working well into her 70s, was somehow confused or incompetent is not just wrong, it's an insult to everything she represents. The trial became a referendum on more than just elder abuse. It exposed the casual cruelty with which wealth and privilege often treat those deemed socially inferior. Media coverage focused on the David and Goliath aspects of the case, with Elena representing the dignity of ordinary people standing up to those who believe money grants them the right to control others. Alexander's testimony proved to be the most damaging to his family's case. Under oath, he was forced to admit that he had been aware of his parents' manipulative behavior but had chosen to enable it rather than confront them. His attorney tried to present him as another victim of his parents' control, but his own words contradicted this narrative. "I knew my mother was managing the wedding planning," he testified, his discomfort obvious. "But I thought she was just being thorough. She's always been very particular about social events." "Did you know that your mother had contacted Mrs. Rosenberg's physician multiple times without authorization?" My attorney pressed. She mentioned something about coordinating medical care. I assumed she had permission." "Did you ask Mrs. Rosenberg or Ms. Jolie if they had given such permission?" Alexander's silence stretched uncomfortably long before he answered, "No. I trusted that my mother was handling things appropriately." That testimony encapsulated everything wrong with Alexander's character and our relationship. He had abdicated his responsibility to protect vulnerable people in favor of maintaining his comfortable assumption that his mother's actions were justified simply because she was his mother. The financial settlement was substantial, but more importantly, it came with court-ordered restrictions that prevented the Blackwood family from having any contact with Elena or interfering in her medical care. Victoria and Charles were required to undergo court-mandated counseling for boundary issues and faced ongoing supervision to ensure compliance with elder protection laws. The social consequences proved more devastating to the Blackwood family than the financial penalties. High society, which had once eagerly courted their favor, now treated them as pariahs. The story of their treatment of a Holocaust survivor spread through their social circles like wildfire, carrying the kind of moral outrage that money couldn't buy away. Corporate boards quietly failed to renew their positions. Charity galas stopped including them on planning committees. Their country club membership was regretfully terminated due to conduct incompatible with club values. Even their longtime friends began declining invitations and making excuses to avoid social events where the Blackwoods might be present. The Blackwood hotel empire suffered as well, with several high-profile clients canceling contracts and new partnerships becoming increasingly difficult to secure. The family business that had been built over 3 generations began showing signs of serious decline as their reputation for trustworthiness crumbled. Charles, unaccustomed to facing consequences for his actions, suffered what appeared to be a stress-induced heart attack 6 months after the trial concluded. While he recovered physically, his mental state remained fragile, and he gradually withdrew from both business and social activities. Victoria, stripped of her social influence and facing ongoing legal restrictions, became increasingly isolated and bitter. Alexander's attempted rehabilitation failed completely. His efforts to distance himself from his parents' actions were seen as cowardly by those who knew the family dynamics, while his failure to protect Elena made him unwelcome in more progressive circles. He eventually moved to Switzerland, where the Blackwood family had business interests, but even there his reputation preceded him. Today, I run my own luxury hospitality consulting firm, working with clients who value genuine service and authentic human connection over superficial status displays. Every policy I develop includes strong protections for vulnerable guests, and every staff training program emphasizes the fundamental dignity that every person deserves. My business success has exceeded my wildest dreams, partly because my experience with the Blackwood family taught me to recognize and address the subtle ways that service industries can exclude or demean certain guests. My firm specializes in making luxury hospitality truly inclusive, ensuring that elderly guests, people with disabilities, and those from different cultural backgrounds receive the same level of respect and accommodation as the wealthiest clients. Elena's legacy lives on through the Elena Rosenberg Foundation, which I established using part of the settlement money. The foundation provides legal advocacy and support services for elderly people facing family manipulation or abuse, ensuring that others don't have to fight these battles alone as we did. The foundation has already helped dozens of families navigate similar situations, from adult children stealing from elderly parents to care facilities neglecting residents' medical needs. Each case reminds me why Elena's fight was so important and why standing up to power and privilege remains necessary work. I've learned that protecting what matters most isn't selfish, it's necessary. Setting boundaries isn't mean, it's survival. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable behavior that harms the people you care about. The wedding that was meant to join two families instead revealed the true character of everyone involved. In losing a husband, I gained clarity about what truly matters in life. In facing down wealth and power, I discovered my own strength. In defending my grandmother, I honored everything she had taught me about resilience and love. Sometimes life gives us experiences that feel devastating in the moment, but ultimately redirect us toward our authentic path. That terrible wedding day, as painful as it was, showed me exactly who I am and what I'm willing to fight for. Elena's final gift to me was the knowledge that I had the strength to protect what matters most, regardless of the cost. The most profound lesson from this experience is that family loyalty should never require us to accept abuse or enable harmful behavior. True love means protecting people from those who would harm them, even when those people are family members or carry social prestige. Elena taught me that survival sometimes requires fighting, and that fighting for justice is never wrong, regardless of how others might judge your methods. Looking back, I realized that the Blackwood family's greatest mistake was underestimating both Elena's resilience and my determination to protect her. They saw an elderly immigrant woman and her granddaughter as easy targets for their manipulation and control. They failed to understand that Elena had survived far worse than their petty cruelties, and that she had raised me to carry forward her strength and principles. Their second mistake was believing that wealth and social status would protect them from consequences. In their world, money had always been able to solve problems and silence victims. They couldn't conceive of a situation where their actions would face genuine accountability, especially from people they considered beneath their notice. Their final mistake was assuming that intimidation and isolation would break our resolve. Instead, their escalating abuse only strengthened my determination to seek justice and protect other vulnerable people from similar treatment. Elena always said that the best way to honor those who came before us is to ensure that their suffering leads to positive change for others. The healing process for both Elena and me took years of therapy, support group participation, and gradually rebuilding trust in relationships. Elena worked with a specialist in elder abuse recovery who helped her process the psychological trauma of being systematically targeted and manipulated. For someone who had survived the Holocaust, being victimized again in her late 80s felt like a profound betrayal of the safety she thought she had finally achieved in America. "I thought I was past being vulnerable to people who use power to hurt others," Elena told her therapist during one session I was permitted to attend. "I survived the camps by learning to read people, to spot danger before it could destroy me. But these people used kindness and concern as masks for their cruelty. They made me doubt my own instincts." The therapist explained that sophisticated manipulators often succeed precisely because they exploit people's desire to trust and their reluctance to believe that those who appear respectable could harbor malicious intentions. "Your survival instincts were absolutely correct," she assured Elena. "You sensed something was wrong from your first interactions with the Blackwood family. The problem wasn't your judgment, it was that they used your granddaughter's happiness as leverage against your better instincts." My own therapy focused on processing the complex grief of losing not just a marriage, but my entire understanding of the person I thought I had married. Alexander's betrayal ran deeper than simple weakness or conflict avoidance. His willingness to prioritize his parents' social agenda over Elena's safety revealed a fundamental absence of empathy and moral courage that made me question every moment of our relationship. "It's natural to wonder whether there were signs you missed," my therapist, Dr. Rebecca Foster, explained during one particularly difficult session. But manipulation specialists are exactly that, specialists. They're skilled at presenting false versions of themselves until they feel secure enough to reveal their true nature. Your mistake wasn't in failing to spot a predator, it was in believing that love could change someone who had chosen to prioritize power over human decency. The support groups I attended included other survivors of family manipulation and abuse, people whose stories shared disturbing similarities to our experience. Wealthy families using their resources to isolate and control vulnerable members appeared to be more common than I had ever imagined. Many support group members had been targeted specifically because they had assets, relationships, or independence that powerful family members wanted to control or eliminate. Margaret, a woman in her 50s whose elderly father had been systematically isolated by her stepmother and stepbrother, shared a story that could have been our own. They convinced everyone that Dad was becoming confused and needed more supervision. They changed his medications, moved him away from his friends, and gradually took control of every aspect of his life. By the time I realized what was happening, they had power of attorney and had already begun transferring his assets to themselves. These stories reinforce the importance of our legal victory and the precedent it set for holding wealthy manipulators accountable for elder abuse. The Elena Rosenberg Foundation began partnering with other advocacy organizations to develop better protection systems and education programs for potential victims and their families. 3 years after the wedding day disaster, Elena and I received an unexpected call from Alexander's sister, Catherine, whom I had barely known during my relationship with Alexander. She was calling from California, where she had moved with her family to escape her parents' influence. "I wanted you to know that what you did, taking them to court, exposing their behavior, it saved my children," Catherine told me, her voice thick with emotion. "After your case became public, I finally had the courage to cut contact with them completely. They had been doing the same things to my kids that they did to your grandmother, trying to undermine my parenting and turn my children against me." Catherine explained that Victoria and Charles had been systematically working to convince her children that their mother was inadequate, offering expensive gifts and experiences while criticizing Catherine's more modest lifestyle and values. "They were grooming my kids to reject me in favor of their superior grandparents," she said. "Your lawsuit showed me that their behavior wasn't just annoying or controlling, it was abusive, and it would only get worse over time." She had successfully obtained restraining orders against her parents and was rebuilding relationships with her children, who were slowly understanding how they had been manipulated. "My kids are in therapy now, learning to recognize manipulation tactics and rebuild their trust in me. It's hard work, but we're getting there." These unexpected connections with other family members who had been harmed by Victoria and Charles's manipulative behavior validated our decision to pursue legal action rather than handling the situation privately. By making their behavior public, we had given other victims permission to speak up and seek protection. The professional impact of my experience extended far beyond my consulting business. I began speaking at conferences about elder abuse recognition and prevention, sharing Elena's story, with her permission, to educate hospitality professionals about the subtle signs of family manipulation and abuse. My presentations became some of the most requested sessions at industry events, as professionals realized how often they might be witnessing abuse without recognizing it. Hotel staff, event planners, and service providers are often the only outside observers of family dynamics during high-stress events like weddings, I would explain to audiences. We have a responsibility to recognize when someone appears uncomfortable, confused, or frightened, especially when family members are controlling their access to medications, food, or basic needs. The hospitality industry began implementing new training programs based on the protocols my firm developed, creating safer environments for vulnerable guests and establishing clear procedures for reporting suspected abuse. Several hotel chains adopted our dignity standards as company policy, ensuring that all guests receive respectful treatment regardless of age, disability status, or social position. Elena's legacy expanded beyond our personal triumph to influence policy changes at state and federal levels. Legislators began introducing stronger protections for elderly people against family financial abuse and medical interference. The Elena's Law Bill, introduced in our state legislature, would require explicit consent for any medication changes and mandate reporting of suspected elder manipulation by medical professionals. The bill faced opposition from wealthy families and their attorneys who argued that it would interfere with legitimate family caregiving, but Elena herself testified before the State Senate committee considering the legislation. At 91 years old, she spoke with the same strength and clarity that had carried her through decades of survival and resilience. "I survived the Holocaust because people who could have helped chose to look the other way," she told the lawmakers, her voice steady despite her age. When someone with power targets someone vulnerable, silence from observers becomes complicity. This law would give people permission to speak up when they see elderly people being harmed by those who claim to love them. The legislation passed unanimously and has since been adopted by 12 other states, creating a network of protection that has already prevented numerous cases of elder abuse and manipulation. Elena lived to see the law's implementation and the first successful prosecutions under its provisions. Her final years were peaceful and filled with the respect and love she had always deserved. The community center where she volunteered established the Elena Rosenberg Community Service Award, recognizing volunteers who demonstrate resilience, compassion, and dedication to helping others. The local Holocaust Memorial Museum created an oral history project preserving Elena's testimony and the stories of other survivors who rebuilt their lives after unimaginable trauma. When Elena passed away at the age of 93, the funeral service overflowed with people whose lives she had touched: Holocaust survivors she had mentored, immigrants she had helped navigate American systems, young people she had tutored in English, and colleagues from decades of volunteer work. The Blackwood family name was never mentioned during the service, but their absence was a testament to Elena's final victory over those who had tried to diminish her worth. The foundation bearing her name continues to grow, now operating in 6 states and helping hundreds of families navigate the complex legal and emotional challenges of elder abuse. We've expanded our services to include emergency intervention, legal advocacy, financial protection planning, and therapeutic support for both victims and their families. Perhaps most importantly, we've created a national database tracking patterns of family manipulation and abuse, helping law enforcement identify serial offenders who target multiple vulnerable family members over time. The Blackwood family appears in this database, ensuring that future potential victims can access information about their history of predatory behavior. My personal life has found new balance and meaning through work that honors Elena's memory while protecting others from similar harm. I've learned that healing from betrayal and abuse doesn't mean forgetting or forgiving. It means transforming pain into purpose and ensuring that suffering leads to positive change for others. The luxury hospitality consulting business continues to thrive, now employing 15 specialists who share my commitment to dignity-centered service. We work exclusively with clients who demonstrate genuine respect for all guests and staff, regardless of their social or economic status. Several Fortune 500 companies have adopted our training programs company-wide, creating ripple effects of positive change throughout the industry. Every success story we hear from families who avoided manipulation because of our education programs, every case of elder abuse prevented through our advocacy work, and every policy change that strengthens protection for vulnerable people represents Elena's enduring impact on the world. Her courage in the face of systematic targeting has created a legacy of protection and empowerment that will outlive all of us. The wedding day that was meant to mark the beginning of my new life instead became the catalyst for discovering my true purpose: protecting those who cannot protect themselves and ensuring that wealth and status never again shield predators from accountability. In losing the marriage I thought I wanted, I found the meaningful work Elena had always known I was capable of achieving. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and protecting someone you love? What did you learn about yourself in that moment? I'd love to hear your stories and reflections in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please share it with others who might need to hear that standing up for your loved ones is always the right choice, even when it's the hardest choice. Remember, you have more strength than you know, and protecting the people you love is never wrong, regardless of what others might say about your decisions. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that their comfort is more important than your family's safety and dignity.